Every day we come across words such as legislation, statute, order, rule, notification, bylaw, act, bill, etc. If you have to look at these words generally, then they all mean the same thing. They simply mean law made by the legislature, or basically a set of rules that everybody in society has to follow. But if you have to look at these words specifically, then each word has a specific legal intention. Hello and welcome to Arthapada. My name is Anuja, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about rules, regulations, and statutes. Let's start with a statute. Another name for a statute is basically an act. An act is the end result of a bill being passed through both houses of parliament and then getting the assent of the president. I had given a basic explanation of how a bill becomes an act in one of my previous videos. Click here if you haven't seen it already. So basically, an act is the end result of a legislative process. As examples go, there is the Companies Act, there is the Information Technology Act, there's the Income Tax Act. There are numerous acts in our country. What are rules? Rules are basically the continuation of an act. You see, the lawmaking process doesn't just end with the president giving his assent. Rather, the law has to be implemented. Officers must be appointed, their salaries must be decided, forms and applications must be drafted, legal processes must be implemented, and proper procedure must be determined for seeking remedies when there is a violation of rights. If the details of this procedure are contained within the Act itself, it would become a very lengthy piece of legislation. It is for this reason that rules are created. The Act and the rules are drafted separately. The rules are only drafted after the Act. All the procedural aspects of an Act are contained within the rules. In short, I can say that the Act consists of the substantive law, while the rules are the procedural law. So if the legislature makes the Act, then who makes the rules? The rule-making power is delegated to the executive body or state. Remember that we had discussed that the legislature makes the laws while the executive implements these laws? The executive implements these laws by way of rules. So if the law is made by the parliament, then the rules are made by the central government. If the laws are made by the state legislature, then the rules are made by the state governments. The law must specify explicitly that power vests with that specific authority. Take for example the Competition Act. Section 63 of the Act states that the central government may by notification make rules for the purpose of this Act. This simply means that the central government has been given the power to make rules for the purpose of this law. We know that an Act is made by the legislature. We know that the rules are delegated to the executive. We know that an Act passes through the rigorous checks of Parliament before it becomes a law. So is it safe to assume that even the rules must pass through the rigorous checks of Parliament? The answer is yes. Once the rules are drafted by the specified authority, the rules have to be tabled before both the houses of Parliament, and Parliament must either accept it, reject it, or amend it within a total period of 30 days. After these 30 days, it must be published as a notification in the Official Gazette before it becomes legal. The Benami Transactions Prohibition Act is a law which was enacted in 1988 with the object of prohibiting Benami transactions and confiscating Benami property. Yet somehow for the next 25 years, it almost seemed like Benami properties were immune from seizure. When the questions were asked, blame was simply put on the fact that no rules were formed and hence the law could not be implemented. The Benami Act was also nicknamed the toothless legislation. From this example, we can understand that an act can exist without the rules. The consequence is simply that the law will not be implemented. But rules cannot exist without an act. And more importantly, rules cannot go beyond the scope and authority of an act. Let's break it down simply. An act is a supreme legislation, while rules are secondary in nature. An act is made by the legislature, while the rules are made by the executive. The contents of the act consist of substantive provisions of law, while rules provide for the procedural aspect of the law. If any provisions of the act clash with that of the rules, then the act will prevail. What are regulations? Many sectors in our country are regulated by independent authorities. The telecom sector is governed by the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. The competition law is governed by the Competition Commission of India. The banking sector is governed by the Reserve Bank of India. Your stocks and mutual funds are governed by SEBI. So you see, SEBI, CCI, RBI, TRAI, all of these authorities are known as statutory authorities. These authorities that I just mentioned above are also known as sectoral regulators. They have been delegated the power to regulate their own sectors. They do this by the passing of regulations. Coming back to the Competition Act. Section 64 of the Competition Act states that the Competition Commission of India may by notification pass regulations so long as it is consistent with the Act and the rules. So we can say that regulations are also subjected to the Act just like rules. So regulations must also be tabled before both the Houses of Parliament, and Parliament must either accept it, reject it, or amend it within a period of 30 days. Regulations and rules are so similar in nature that it is constantly used interchangeably. Both are passed by the executive body, both are subject to an act, both have to be tabled before the Houses of Parliament, and both have to be published as a notification in the official gazette. The difference, however, lies in the fact that rules are formed by the central government or the state government, whereas regulations are passed by independent statutory authorities such as RBI, CCI, TRAI, etc. So regulations are also a type of secondary legislation. To sum it all up, an act is made by the legislature, while the rules and regulations are made by the executive. I hope you found this video to be interesting and informative. Do subscribe to my channel for much more simplified content on law.